Let's start with it's a terrible story. It's a disaster just off the coast of Sicily, this yacht.
Yeah.
24 hours, absolutely crucial now that if there are any survivors, I think the feeling is they've got to be found in the next 24 hours. What the families and people who will know Mike Lynch will be going through. And actually, you know, worth pointing out, very well connected, this guy, Mike Lynch.
Yeah, he's a very impressive businessman.
Yeah.
And he was one of the great tech innovators in the UK. I think this is an extremely affecting human story because of the context of his trial. And, you know, we were dealing with that issue in government. There was an extradition. He had to be taken over to the US. There was controversy about that. And then he actually fought the US government in court, essentially, and he won his case. And that was only 2 months ago. And this tragedy was a celebration. I mean, the boating trip was a celebration of the fact that he'd been acquitted, which was very much against the odds. And so for this to have happened now is a great tragedy.
Absolutely.
And one can only imagine the horror for the family. And the daughter as well. I mean, she was 18.
Yes.
She was about to go off to university.
She'd got a place at Oxford.
She got her A-level results.
That's right. She'd got a place at university, and it's a huge tragedy.
And of course, there's others that are missing. And it's funny, Ada was saying at the beginning of the programme, you know, people will be on holiday in the Mediterranean or being on holiday in the Mediterranean, and you know, you see these extraordinary, lavish super yachts floating off, and you think, wow, that person's life must have no problems, you know. And it's impossible to say how super this super yacht was. £30 million, every possible mod con. But now their investigators are looking into whether it was something as simple as a hatch being left open.
Yeah, I think there were two possible suggestions earlier this week as to why it seemed to have sunk so quickly. One was that the mast was so big that the wind just knocked it sideways straight away. Now, there's an expert quoted in the Times.
That would have been thought about.
But they're supposed to be, I think, in response to that, they're supposed to have something that lowers down underneath that is a counterweight to the mast.
They're supposed to have an extendable...
whether that has been used, I think it's called a keel, the boat people know. Whether that's been used or put into action, well, absolutely no idea.
Yeah, so that was one of the questions. Now, there's an expert quoted in the Times today saying, we don't think it was the mast that was the problem.
Right.
But, you know, the sails were furled, so it wouldn't have caught the wind in the same way. And this thing is apparently intact at the bottom of the sea and is designed to withstand much greater pressures. So that seems to not be the suggestion. Well, in that case, what was it that meant that this boat sank so quickly that nobody could respond? Maybe it was the fact that hatches were left open. Maybe it was, you know, it was a warm night. It obviously was a warm night. Maybe people thought, we'll leave the windows open to let some air in. But there had been a storm earlier on in the evening, I think on the other side of Sicily, or further north anyway. You think if that was going on not too far away, you know, it doesn't seem...
I mean, some meteorologists have said they should have been alerted, they should have had life jackets on. I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Hindsight is a great thing.
But also the mood of celebration that would have been happening because of that court case being resolved in June. And the bizarre, we were saying earlier in the week, weren't we, how the conspiracy theorists were really involved in this, because the bizarre coincidence, one has to assume at this stage, that Stephen Chamberlain, the vice principal, the other co-defendant in this case for Autonomy, the company that Mike Lynch had, by an accident outrunning, hit by a car just days before.
Yeah, I mean, that's the bit that's made everyone on Twitter and social media, or many people, go into the whole conspiracy theory angle.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think it was. I just think it's one of those crazy coincidences.
It is.
That sometimes happen in life.
And that reminder that you never know what's around the corner.
No.
Looking as well at the other front page of the newspaper, Labour on the seemingly launching a big surge to tackle migration and immigration. So with several new measures, Vet Cooper, the Home Secretary, has outlined new plans for the next 6 months, wants to achieve the highest rate of removals and returns to country since 2018. That's the sort of figures that have been put on it. And also announcing new sort of special investigators to go and find people, bring them to centres, which they're creating more spaces before to hold them. An effective way to tackle it, do you think?
Look, I think they've got to try something. I mean, it's clear to me, you know, when we were in government, that this was a big failure among other things. But this was a big reason why I think you had the rise of reform. We made various pledges that, frankly, we didn't keep. I remember campaigning in 2010. We said there'd be tens of thousands, and that didn't happen. So any new government has to deal with this issue. And I think it's to be commended that they're trying to grapple with it very early on. Now, what they do, how effective it is, only time will tell. But I think it was an issue that they have to address. If you look at the Parliament, you look at people like Nigel Farage and others, and the fact that Reform got 4 million votes essentially around this issue, any new government had to deal with this, and I think it's commendable that they...
Did it frustrate you? Because, of course, it was a big tenet, wasn't it, of Rishi Sunak's campaign?
Yeah, I mean...
Stop the vote. Did it frustrate you that was the failure that you say it was?
Well, I just think that, you know, over 14 years, I can be frank now, we failed to grapple with this issue. And I think if you do that, you're going to allow people on the right, within our own party, if you look at the rise of Reform, it was very much powered by this. And also, I mean, we may talk about this later. I mean, what's happened this summer? You know, the immigration issue has been lurking in the background. So I think it's very responsible for the government to say, look, this is a problem. This is something we need to tackle. And these are measures that we're going to bring in to tackle them.
What do you say of the allegations about the Conservatives, though, that when they were in office? So we know that by March 24, there were still 84,000 applicants still waiting to be processed. The allegation is that was a political decision on the Conservative parties.
Well, I'm not sure...
That by creating this backlog, you creating the story, whereas actually they could have just processed them a hell of a lot quicker.
So I think, you know, again, I always go up for... I think it was a mistake. I think there was administrative incompetence, actually. I don't think it was...
Just not very good at processing.
I don't think it was a conspiracy. I don't think there was some... person in Downing Street saying, actually, do you know what we're going to do? We're going to make the backlog longer and longer and longer to make it into an issue. I don't think that was what happened.
You just think of a very bad
I think also, you know, when you're in government, you've got, you know, ministers at the top of a department, but you've got thousands of people in the department who need to be managed and guided. And actually, I think a lot of the problems are coming not from the civil servants. I mean, they're good civil servants, but from how they interact with the ministers and what the ministers actually want to do.
Was it a financial thing as well?
And also, there's always a financial thing. So, you know, I mean, the way that the OBR, which sort of judges these things, and Kieran might have a word to say about that, they actually factor in immigration and they say, well, that's driving the economy.
Kieran, this is on immigration. Look, and it's ever since what's happened in the last couple of weeks in this country, it's a really important subject that we need to talk and be honest about. What's interesting with Labour, though, the line is, it seems to be a line that you'd expect from the Conservatives. We're going to be sending them back. We're going to deport the ones back. I mean, I've said this to Yvette Cooper in the past on this show, that not so long ago, about a year ago, the line from the Labour Party was, you know, we want more safe and legal routes, and we've got to look at, allowing people to come here if they're able to come here. It's interesting that the Labour, even now they are elected, they're still taking this quite hard line on it.
Well, I think rhetorically they are. I think what they're really worried about is the fact that they've scrapped the Rwanda scheme and that being used as a weapon against them. And what I'm really interested in hearing from Kwasi, actually, is whether you think that scheme could ever have worked. And if not, you know, how big a mistake was it for the government to have pursued that for so long? Because that's really the missing part of this debate.
Look, I think Rwanda was very much almost like a signal of intent. And I think what the government failed to do, and this is where I think a lot of the end when Rishi was Prime Minister was a problem, is that he didn't look as if he could ever deliver the policy. And yet at the same time, he couldn't say, actually, this is not going to work, I've got to scrap it. So he was sort of betwixt and between. He could have done, but I think there would have been, his view probably was that there would have been such a loss of face and political capital.
I suppose the point is, can you ever stop the boats, illegal trafficking, if there isn't a legal route for the people? And are they ever going to...
There is a legal route, and the issue isn't...
There isn't really.
There's only a legal route if you come from certain countries.
That's right.
There's a route if you come from Ukraine. There's a route if you come from Afghanistan. There's no route if you're coming from Sub-Saharan.
And even the Afghanistan route is sort of really... There's a backlog there.
Yeah,
people still in Afghanistan waiting to come.
So the big issue around immigration is not the fact of immigration. I mean, many of us around this table are the sons of first and second or grandchildren of second-generation immigrants. The issue is the scale, in terms of the numbers, and the capacity of our society to absorb the numbers of people coming in. That's what the debate is about. And I think where the Conservative Party, where my party failed, was we created an impression that we were going to do something about it and we were going to limit it to tens of thousands, when in fact the opposite happened. And that was a huge defeat for the Conservative
Do you think parties talk enough about the positive benefits of immigration, though? Because we've seen what happens. These riots that happened in the last 2 weeks, a lot of people say it's because of immigration, but are we saying enough about actually the NHS, hospitality, finance, the legal sector? Well, so many industries would fall apart if it wasn't for migration.
So I think you're right to say we don't celebrate the positivity of it. But a lot of that is because, I think, a good reflection on Britain in that a lot of that's been accepted. I mean, if you go to other countries, they've got far more difficulties with people of different cultures, people of different ethnicities. And I think Britain generally has had a good record on this, if you compare it to other countries. Compare it to France, for example.
Yeah.
But I think in the last few years, we've had a big problem in terms of the numbers. And that's where people like Nigel Farage and others use the disaffection to stir up, for their own political ends.
I think also we need to differentiate here between legal and illegal migration, or rather legal and irregular migration, because what we're talking about here is small boats crossings, which is people seeking asylum. Now, that is actually a relatively small number compared to people coming here perfectly legally to seek work. And I've been reporting for the last few weeks, really, on what's going on in the British care sector, which is now essentially staffed by people who've been brought in over the last couple of years, particularly from India and parts of Africa, and really wouldn't survive without those people.
And there's still shortages, even with that, and the massive discouraging of
from a political point of view, the optics of people coming over the channel in dinghies is terrible.
By the way,
they're at risk themselves, and nobody wants that.
And also there's criminality behind it as well, the traffickers. I mean, it's a big issue.
Of course it is. You mentioned the riots and possibly what may have been surrounding the vibrations that caused the racism and abuse of that. The King went to Southport yesterday and spoke to people, and it was rather moving, actually. Both you and I thought it, didn't we, Adil? The reaction from the people there to see the King, talking to them, trying to help them deal and heal with what's happened, and reminded you of the power, actually, that he can have in these situations.
And you'll be aware, so, having worked in Westminster, I always think that those towns, and it's terrible it's happened in these circumstances, but they sometimes feel miles away from politics, miles away from the monarch, because they're not in London. Just for the King to come and do a walk around in that town must mean a million things.
Well, I met him. I was lucky enough to meet him when I was in government, and he's a very humane person. I mean, he would have really wanted to do that himself. You've got to remember that he's also had treatment. He's been unwell recently, and for him to do that is remarkable. I think to go out there, and he's really out of his comfort zone as well. I mean, he's not somebody who's he didn't have he wasn't sort of didn't have the common touch in that phrase that people like Princess Diana had. But he felt a genuine human connection with people in
do you
South.
agree?
Yeah, did you hear that when he first arrived? There's a brilliant piece of footage where this young lad shouts something like, "Yes, King lad."
What's that mean?
I bet he laughed, didn't he? I bet he loved it. Yes, King lad.
If I was Buckingham Palace, I'd just be repeating that.
On a
Yes. The next line was, "Do you fancy a pint?
Yeah.
But that's the kind of stuff that matters to those people.
Oh, definitely.
It's sort of.
I think it's a great sign of his humanity and his strength, actually, and also the fact that people responded to him in that way.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if he had a ham sandwich when he was there, because ham sandwiches are being sort of like waved in our faces at the moment. Yeah,
is that legal?
I have to say, it's something I've resorted to, is something that the kids always eat at any point. But a study of nearly 2 million adults suggests eating 2 slices of ham a day increases the risk of type 2 diabetes by 15%. 15% from what, I wonder? But Dr. Hilary joins us now. Hilary, that's rather alarming. It is the sort of the stuff of school lunchboxes for many people, and an easy and quick snack. But to think it can increase type 2 diabetes by this much is a worry, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it'll surprise many people who know about the association between sugary drinks, energy drinks, sweetened cereals. They know about the association with refined carbohydrates, white bread, white rice, and this will surprise them. Red meat and processed meats could increase the risk of type 2 diabetes by this much. So if we quantify this, we're talking about 50 grams every day of unprocessed meat. That would be the equivalent of 2 slices of ham, but it also includes things like sausages and bacon, salami, for example. But they've also tried to quantify the amount of red meat, unprocessed meats that could be responsible for an increased risk. And they looked at a small steak, 100 grams of ordinary unprocessed red meat could increase the risk by 10% as well. Even poultry they looked at and said that could raise the risk, increase the risk by 8%, but they're not quite sure about that because of confounding factors that might make that less reliable. Nevertheless, it's consistent with recommendations from the NHS already that we change from eating 90 grams of these foods to 70 grams a day to reduce our risk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Hillary.
Hillary. Always wise
really
words.
Clear. There'll be a lot of vegetarians and Muslims and Jews who are going, well, I don't eat ham, so I'm all
No, they're not bothered.
Maybe that's the way forward.
Absolutely.
You suffer from diabetes.
Well, no, I haven't suffered from... I mean, I think when I was a minister in about 4 or 5 years ago, the diet I had was appalling.
Right.
And particularly in the COVID time, you know, I would just nip out to grab a pizza or whatever it was when we were working from home and it was all the lockdown. And actually, I had a checkup and my blood sugar levels were very high. And the doctor said, you know, you're in a pre-diabetic situation. And what I did was just simply cut back on pizzas and carbs and alcohol. And over 6 months, I did manage to reduce the blood sugar.
Did you change the company you were with at the time? Or, you know?
Well, I changed different aspects of my lifestyle. But it was something that I was very aware of. And as far as I was concerned, it had a lot to do with diet.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that we've had, you know, big spikes, particularly in different ethnic communities.
Well, say black and Asian people are more
That's right, they're more likely to...
They?
So I was very conscious of that.
Yeah.
And I think just through diet, and it doesn't surprise me that processed meat can, according to the study, lead to increased
it feels a little bit sort of common sense, in a way. That we're sort of trained now to have a more balanced diet. I think more people are doing that.
Yeah, I think we've known about the dangers of red meat and processed meat for a long time. I always think the problem with these kind of public health warnings is getting the messaging right. So 2 slices of ham, you know, as you were saying, 15% from what?
From what?
2 slices of ham isn't a lot.
Especially if you've got it with veg and salad, potentially. I mean, Hillary, you're still there. You know, obviously, what is the best way to manage if you feel you're at risk of type 2 diabetes? Or indeed just to prevent yourself getting into that category at all?
Well, certainly we know that moving more, just being more physically active, maintaining a healthy weight, this is important, but diet plays a huge part. So if we eat more nuts and seeds, beans, lentils, peas, unsaturated, unsweetened yogurts, those kind of foods, rather than too much processed meats, then and these sugary foods, then we'd all be far better off. After all, look, the 4.5 million people in this country are already living with diabetes, and there's probably 500,000 at least more who don't yet know that they are living with diabetes and haven't been diagnosed. So this is a massive problem. It's the leading cause of blindness and kidney disease and heart disease and strokes and lower limb amputations, type 2 diabetes. So it's important we get a grip on this, and we need to do much more about advertising unhealthy foods. We need to cut that out, and we need to subsidise healthy foods and encourage people to enjoy them more.
OK. So we're ordering yoghurt for breakfast for you two this morning. OK.
Unsweetened, yes, he's not giving you a sugar.
Yeah.
Quick word at the front page of the I newspaper. We mentioned it in our headlines, didn't we? Brits could have a bit of a shock. These new rules that are coming in November. First lot coming in November, which means you've got to have fingerprint and various other biometrics to travel to the EU. And then potentially from May, you've got to get yourself a visa, which is about equivalent to about £6 or a visa waiver, a little bit like the American ESTA. People will be shocked about that. Is this consequence of Brexit?
Bonus, isn't it?
We're not going to revisit that debate.
But people didn't fear. But people were always told that there wouldn't be a problem, and now there is.
I think the EU is essentially sending a message. You know, we're the EU. If you're out, you have to pay to come in, which is not ideal. But I think that you know, we could be in a situation. I don't know what the government will do, but I imagine we could reciprocate, which isn't helpful. We should really get together and try and ease that sort of travel.
The risk is, I think, not so much with the £6 or whatever it is, and not even with having to apply for, you know, if you've ever done an American ESTA, it's pretty straightforward. You go on the thing, you click a button and it gets approved straight away. It's that, if you've ever been to America, you realise this, the queues trying to get through American immigration are massive. Now, if we go through a summer where you can't, you know, get through French passport control because it's just taking too long for everybody to check these visa waivers, you know, that does become a problem.
And I think for people, they might worry about the £6. You know, you've got a family of 5, you get to the airport, they say that even if they can process it, first of all, you might not be able to fly, and then next, you're suddenly looking at a big extra chunk of cash on what you thought was your, you know, cheaper holiday.
A bit like turning up for a Ryanair flight without having checked in and printed off your boarding pass first. You're suddenly like, £30 extra.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Exactly. One of those situations.
A very quick mention of what's happening in Gaza. Just a very quick one here. Yeah. I know you've been out in Washington, and yesterday the narrative from Biden's camp and from Blinken was that this is it now. This is the last chance saloon for a ceasefire. All the noises coming out of Israel and Hamas is looking unlikely. What America are calling for is this first stage of the ceasefire, which is the release of hostages. The fact that Blinken and Biden, they almost rolled the dice, didn't they? They said, this is the last chance saloon. In fact, it looks like that's not happening. Does that make this an even worse situation now?
I think it'll be difficult for them. And also the backdrop behind all this is the presidential election. And that's, you know, part of the Democrats' coalition are Arab Americans, particularly in a state like Michigan. And so they have to be very strong on the ceasefire and seem to be tough on Israel. Now, if that doesn't work out, I think there could be not so much a backlash, but it'll show their ineffectiveness. So many people dying. We've seen another attack on schools. Hostages still held in captivity. We don't know whether they're dead or alive. I mean, people's lives are literally at stake.
Yeah, I mean, Kwasi mentions the fact that it's important for the Democrats to look like they're being tough on Israel. Actually, I think the optics were the opposite of that, because Antony Blinken turns up ready to sign this peace deal that's essentially already been agreed. You know, they know the terms of it. And suddenly the Netanyahu government turns around and says, actually, we want a permanent presence in Gaza. We want to control the Rafah border crossing. Blinken, instead of saying no, turns around, you know, to the Palestinian authorities and says, well, can you sign up to these? They say, you know, it looks like they're being pushed around at every stage by the Netanyahu government. But what I think the Americans are really trying to do, to be honest, is I think that they have probably come to the acceptance that there is not going to be a peace deal before the American election. Why would Netanyahu sign up to something when it might get...
Exactly.
What they want to do is make sure Iran does not launch any kind of offensive, does not get involved in this dispute. And if Iran thinks that maybe a peace deal is on the table, maybe things will calm down.
It's catastrophic for the Palestinians and the families of those hostages.
Yeah, and meanwhile, people are dying.
We didn't even get to speak about Bennifer, Kwasi, but, you know, we'll
You're a big fan.
The really crucial issues of the day.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much indeed.